Hello everyone and welcome to my Unreal Engine C++ tutorial. In this tutorial, we will be creating a tic-tac-toe game using Unreal Engine and C++. We will also cover essential topics such as using enums to manage game difficulty, implementing interfaces for clean communication between classes, designing widgets to create a user interface, and writing C++ code for game logic. By the end of the series, you will have not only a working tic-tac-toe game, but also a deeper understanding of key Unreal Engine features that you can apply to your own projects. Now, before we dive into the code, I will first show you a quick demo of what we will be building, so you can see how everything comes together. So as you can see, the game has a simple interface where a player plays against an AI opponent, which adjusts its difficulty based on the level you choose. So if I go with easy difficulty, the opponent will play random moves. Okay, so as you can see, I got 3 in a row, and the game automatically detects when the player wins, loses, or if the game ends in a draw. Now, in the upcoming tutorial, we will go through each part of this game, starting from setting up the grid and moving all the way to implementing the AI. So, let's get started. So the first thing we gotta do is create a C++ blank folder, C++ blank project, and let's call it tic-tac-toe tutorial. Okay, make sure that the quality presets we set it to scalable. This is optional, but since our project is only a user interface project, so we don't really need this maximum. So let's go scalable. And target platform, let's keep it desktop for now and create. Alright, this will take time to create, so I will fast forward until it's created. See you then. Okay, so our project is up and running. The first thing we gotta do is get rid of this huge unnecessary map. And to do so, we go to the content drawer, we create a new folder, let's call it maps. And let's create a new level, empty level, create, and let's save it in the maps folder. And let's call it tic-tac-toe map. Alright, cool. So now let's start by creating our C++ classes. The first class we need is the game mode. So let's go to tools, new C++ class, all classes, and let's search for game mode. And let's inherit from game mode base. Let's call it tic-tac-toe game mode. And let's give it class type public. So as you can see, a public class can be included and used inside other models in addition to the model it resides in. Create class. Okay, so the first thing we gotta do is to create some game variables and game functions that we will be using throughout the tutorial. So the first thing we want to create is obviously the constructor. And to do so, okay, so as we know in C++ we have 3 types of access specifiers, right? So it's public, protected, and private. Now, quick recap of each one. Public access specifier is members are accessible from anywhere inside the class, in derived classes, and outside the class. They are typically used for functions meant to be accessed by other classes, or even the engine itself. The protected access specifier members are only accessible inside the class and in its derived classes. They are not accessible from outside the class. Okay, so it's basically useful for variables or functions meant for subclasses, but not the outside, um, outside world. Okay, and the private one The private ones are only accessible within the same class. They are not accessible by external classes or even by derived classes. They are usually used for encapsulation, preventing unwanted modifications. Okay, so let's get started. To create our constructor, well, we are actually defining our constructor now because in C++ we have two types of files. The .h file is where everything is defined, and .c++ class where the actual scripting happens. Okay, everything will make sense in a bit. So we are defining our constructor now, and in order to access it from here, we right click on it, quick actions, create definition, and tic-tac-toe game mode.cpp. So, and it does what it says. Okay, so let's create our game variables. The first variable we need is a boolean, which will keep track of the player's turn, if it's the player turn or the AI turn. So is player turn, and by default we want it to be the player turn, so it's true. Next, what we want to create is an integer array, an integer to the array actually, which will represent our grid. So as we know, the tic-tac-toe grid looks like so. So it's row 1, row 2, and row 3. Column 1, column 2, column 3. So it's 3 by 3, right? So grid 3, 3. Okay, 3 times 3, tic-tac-toe grid. The next thing we want to create are some game methods. Oops. Game functions. First function is of type void because we don't want it to return anything. It's called player move, and this function is responsible for the player move. So whenever the player clicks, it's responsible for it. Okay. Player move takes two parameters, int row and int column, to keep track of which row and column are clicked. The next one is void AI move, the same as player move but for the AI. Okay, and it does not take any parameters. The third function is switch turn, which will be responsible for switching turns between the player and the AI. Okay, now let's create some functions for the AI logic. Okay, so what do we plan to do with AI? We plan to have 3 difficulties, right? Easy, medium, and hard AI. So in order to do that, we want to create an enumeration. And if you don't know what an enum is, basically enums are a way to define a set of named integral constants, making code more readable and maintainable. Okay, they are commonly used for AI states, game modes, item types, and so on. So to create an enum, we actually have two ways of doing it. The first way is by creating an empty class, okay, and this class will be responsible for this enum, and we can use it in every class we have. The second way is to create a local enum in our game mode, which will only be used inside our game mode. Okay, and in our case, that's what we will do because we really don't need it anywhere else. Okay, just inside our game mode. So in order to create it, we go enum blueprint type. Okay, and then enum class, and let's call it EAI underscore difficulty. Okay, U8. So that's the standard way to create an enum. So inside it, we define our actual uh, values of it. So we want to have, as we said, easy, medium, and hard. So easy, U meta display name. Let's give it name easy. Okay. Medium, U meta display name medium, and hard, U meta display name equal hard. Okay. So oh, we forgot the U over here. That's why you have all these errors. Okay. So our enum is ready. Okay, we want to create a, so now since we created this, we don't actually have a variable for it yet. So let's go ahead and create one very fast. AI underscore difficulty AI or AI difficulty is equal to, let's give it a default value of easy. Okay, so now our AI is easy by default. Now let's create our void. Let's create a function for the easy mode for AI, right? So we'll have three functions, one for easy, one for medium, and one for hard. Let's create the easy mode AI. Let's give it integer row out row and out column. Nice. Let's create another function to check if the board, if the tic-tac-toe grid is full or not. So to do that, we need the function to be of type boolean. It returns true if it's full, and it returns false if it's not. So is board is grid full, and we can actually make it be constant because why not? Oops. Okay, so we are ready to begin some scripting. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a definition in the CPP class for each function we just created, we just defined. Okay, so to compile our changes in the Visual Studio to the engine, we simply click this button here. As you can see, it recompiles and reloads C++ code for game systems on the fly. So let's go ahead. If we have any error, the compile will fail and it will give us the error. Okay, so batch creation successful, live coding succeeded. Great. So now if we start our game, it's actually an empty level. We don't have anything. So let's change it. the first thing we want to do is create a user widget to display. Let's go ahead and create a new C++ class of and derive it from user widget. Let's call it tic-tac-toe widget. Okay, so our tic-tac-toe widget is created. Let's click reload all, and as you can see, it's created successfully. So let's go ahead and script it, shall we? Okay, so what do we actually need for our tic-tac-toe widget? We need a grid panel to hold our grid, right? And we need a okay, no, let's just start with the grid panel for now. So in order to do that, we forward declare our grid class uGridPanel. Okay, then in the public access specifier, we will create it. We will actually define the variable for it, right? So uGridPanel grid, let's call it grid, simply grid. Okay, or tic-tac-toe grid. Okay, and in order to access this grid in our widget here, we need to give it a macro. The macro says basically allows it to be accessed inside the Unreal Engine, right inside the editor. So view property meta equal bind widget. This will allow our grid to be binded inside the editor when we create the blueprint class based on this widget, right? So let's go ahead and do that real quick to show you what I mean. Nice. So inside the content, let's create a new folder, call it UI. Okay, so right click on tic-tac-toe widget, create a blueprint class based on this widget. Okay, so let's call it tic-tac-toe underscore blueprint UI create. Okay, as you can see, we have a warning, right? So if we try to compile it, we get an error. A required widget binding tic-tac-toe grid of type grid panel was not found. That's because it's not available here and the engine couldn't link this one to anything in here, right? So in order to fix that, we search for grid panel, make sure if it's of the same type. Let's drag it here, or actually, let's create our canvas first. Canvas border. Let's fill it and let's change its color. Okay, this looks good for me. So let's give it a vertical box too, because we will need it later on. And now let's create our grid. Grid panel. Okay, let's center it and let's call it tick. Make sure you call it the same name in here. So let's just copy this. Alright, now the error is gone. Great. So now what we have to do is add this widget to our screen, right? And in order to do that, we need to go back to the game mode and define this widget in here. So how do we do it? First of all, we need to forward declare it in order to be able to access it inside the game mode, right? So class tic-tac-toe widget. Great. U tic-tac-toe widget, sorry. Okay, now let's go and create a class for it. U class tic-tac-toe class. Okay. Then we need an instance of for this widget, which will be able to inherit from this class. Okay, so everything will make sense in a bit. So let's go ahead and create the instance. U tic-tac-toe widget. Okay, let's call it tic-tac-toe widget instance. Great. So how do we actually create it here? Okay, it's very simple. What do we need to do is go to our constructor and actually get a reference to our blueprint here. How do we do it? So simply right click on it, copy reference. Okay, and now what we want to do is create this widget from the constructor. So load the tic-tac-toe widget using constructor helper and via path. Okay, so static constructor helpers f class finder u tic-tac-toe widget. Let's call it widget class, and let's store the path in here. Okay, so as you can see, the character class to find. So text, and let's set the text over here. Control V to paste it. Make sure you remove everything before the game and to remove this double duplicate name. Okay, so if widget class was found, okay, dot succeeded was found, the tic-tac-toe widget class we defined here will be equal to widget class dot class. Simple. Okay, so if this path was found, means this class is valid, which means this class will be valid also. Nice. Now we have to display it. Okay, and in order to do that, we need to create a new, actually to override a function, which is the begin play function, right? So to do that, we have to first define it. Since it's a inherited function, we start by virtual void begin play override. Okay. Okay, and let's super begin play. What this does is it calls the parent begin play function. Okay, so if tic-tac-toe game mode inherits from game mode base, it means this function is calling the game mode base begin play. Okay, so let's now create and display the tic-tac-toe widget. We first need to check if the class is valid. Okay, so this basically means checking if the class is valid, and if so, do this. Okay, if it's valid, then tic-tac-toe widget instance equal create widget u tic-tac-toe widget. Okay. Okay, so the error here is because we are trying to access this tic-tac-toe widget, which is of type u tic-tac-toe widget, in our CPP class without including the header for this file, right? So to fix it, we need to include tic-tac-toe widget.h. Okay, so now we need to pass the arguments. Create widget, as you can see, first argument is the owning object, which will be our get word. Then the second argument is the subclass of user widget. User widget class in our case is the tic-tac-toe widget class, right? So that's how you create the widget. Now to display it, we check if the tic-tac-toe widget instance is valid, just same as here. And if it's valid, we add it to viewport. Add to viewport. It's that simple. So let's go ahead and test this. Let's compile first our changes. Nice. Live coding succeeded. Let's go to project settings, maps and modes, and let's change our default game mode to tic-tac-toe game mode. And let's change our map to tic-tac-toe map. And we are ready to start. Finger crossed, this should work. Yep, as you can see, our widget is created. Nice. Okay, one more thing is to fix this annoying mouse. Let's always show the mouse because whenever we click here, it will disappear. And we don't want that. So let's fix that real quick. Let's go back to begin play. Okay, under the condition, let's go with a player controller. Let's call it my player controller. Okay, the reason I didn't call it player controller is because whenever I will try to compile this change, it will give me an error because the player controller is defined by default for our engine. Okay, so we will have a duplicate of name, so it won't work. So call it my player controller. It's equal to get word. So get word is getting the word we are actually in, which means in our case it's this tic-tac-toe map, right? Get word, get first player controller. To get the first player controller, as it says, returns the first player controller or none if there is not one. Okay, and this is actually equivalent to get player controller node in blueprints, if you are familiar with blueprints. So if my player controller, if it's not empty, if it's not null, my player controller be show mouse cursor is equal to true. Always show the mouse cursor, right? And then we want to change the input mode to UI only. So set input mode f input mode UI only. Okay. Great. Nice. So finger crossed, this should work. The mouse now will stay in our screen. Okay, nice. You see I'm clicking and it's not disappearing, just as intended. Okay, so this wraps it for this tutorial. Make sure to hit dislike, subscribe, and if you have any question, let me know in the comments, and I will see you in the next video.